In today's daily news, I thought it necessary to walk our listeners through the controlled re-entry application form process, which is a critical step for coming to the island of Jamaica. And there are two sets of persons who it pays close attention to, whom will benefit from the controlled re-entry program. Now, there are many persons who would have said our airports opened all the way back in June, and so everything should be fine and dandy just now. But one of the things I discovered is that even though this is a new norm, many persons who are traveling may have just not done their controlled re-entry application form. And so, much to my surprise, persons are still turning up at various airports across North America in particular without the form being completed. And as a result, the airlines will not allow you to travel. So the stories are ongoing. Persons get to the airport, bags packed, shopping done, and there they are now on time for their flight. Some of them cutting it a little bit too close for comfort, only to be advised that that essential document that must be perused by the airline is missing. And so they go into panic. So just for you to know before you go, please, you must go to the JamCovid-19 site, and we'll put the link in the description below, but it's jamcovid.moh.gov.jm/immigration.html, and this is where you will start the process, and there will be two questions to kick things off. Are you a Jamaican resident? Are you a visitor? And the instructions and the procedures will differ depending on which of those two categories you fall into. Now, just a few important things that you will need to complete this form, and they might sound simple, but hear me out. For you to complete the controlled reentry form, you must have an email address. And yes, that sounds simple enough, but I stand here to tell you that there are many persons traveling who, for one reason or another, never considered it necessary to have an email address. And for those of you who don't, I would always recommend that you go to Gmail, simply because it is linked to so many other useful platforms. For example, YouTube, where you're watching this video. And once you have created that Gmail email address, you are able, for example, to log into your Gmail on your device, go to Share Fantastic Travels and Resorts Limited, view our video on YouTube, click the subscribe button so that you will get many other good notices like this from us, and voila, you are ready to go. Now, we speak about subscribing to our channel, and it is so important that with the new information age and media happening at the speed of light, that you remain on top and with your finger on the pulse to get instant updates on valuable news, breaking events, and niche matters that might concern you. There is such a flood of information that now we have been able, thanks to YouTube, to segment them. So because you are a traveler, you are dreaming to be a traveler, you live and work in the traveler space, we know that the updates and the information provided right here at Share Fantastic is so timely. And so you don't have to sift through thousands and thousands of news reports to get the facts as they pertain to you. So, once again, create that Gmail account, go to your device, log on, click YouTube, search for Share Fantastic Travels and Resorts Limited or Share Fun Vibe, and watch our videos. There's a video there on almost everything that will be of interest to you. Remember to give us that thumbs up. It really does assist in the analytics. It also will help YouTube to know that this content is relevant and encourage them to make it more available to many, many more persons. And critical to the process as well is sharing. You know, sharing is caring. And sharing is free on this platform. And this information coming forth is so important. So remember to share it with all your contacts in all the different ways, to WhatsApp, to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, however you share, just share it out. So this is a very critical point. You must have that Gmail email address. Another important point is that in the event that somebody assists with completing this application for you, you must have them declare that it was done by somebody else, and you should still be using your email address, because you see, it's not just for the form's completion. Everything that is communicated with you via this particular platform will be done through your email address. So very, very critical. There are some bits of information that the application form will require. And the personal information required include your name, your date of birth, your residential address in Jamaica, phone contact, passport number. That's very critical. Now, they will also require date of and reason for traveling overseas prior to the closure of the borders. Now, this was set up earlier, so a lot of us would have been traveling since the border has reopened, so that step might not be necessary for you. And of course, your current country location and the city that you are in. Now, there's other information that will be pulled from the form, pulled in by the form, and this is what might be deemed critical for the processing of the application. Now, the health related information, whether you have had symptoms, whether you have been tested for COVID-19, whether you have come into contact with persons who may have tested positive, those are very important questions as well, including your existing health condition. Prior to submitting this application, you will be asked to consent to accepting responsibility for making your own travel arrangements at your own expense for your return to Jamaica. And this again would have been during that time when the borders were just reopening. So, but it will still ask you something along that line. There is also an agreement. And remember, this is a legally binding document, guys. So don't just click agree. And then when you break the agreement and you are picked up because you violated the I'll tell you what the term is being used now. It has just slipped me, but there is actually an enforceable ordinance that if you break the agreement, you're going to be charged for. So I'll find the name of it, but it's a very serious offense should you agree and then you violate. So the agreement is to mandatory quarantine at a place designated by the government of Jamaica for 14 days. This is no small thing, guys. This is a strong instruction. And you also agreed to be tested under the following COVID-19 testing protocol. A nasal, I don't even want to massacre this word, but you're going to be doing a swab to the nose at least 2 times on entry into quarantine and prior to release from quarantine. I know a lot of times we kind of just gloss over these things and say, yeah, let's get on with it. But these are very important things, guys. We need to pay attention to it. Now, it continues to say if your initial test for COVID is positive or you develop any symptoms of COVID during your period of quarantine, you agree to be placed in mandatory isolation for treatment until you have fully recovered, and to allow further samples for testing being taken using the already described nasal swab during your period of isolation. It continues to say that you are agreeing that you will be responsible for payment of US $20 per day for 3 meals while in mandatory state quarantine. So if it comes to that, you're responsible for your meals. The cost is US $20 per day. And you are also agreeing that in the event that you're not in state quarantine, you are going to be making your own private arrangements for meals to be delivered at the quarantine location. And this would be subject to the relevant health and security protocols. Now, this is where it gets a little sticky. You're in the airport in Miami, Orlando, North Carolina, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and the airline employee seems to be giving you a hard time. Well, it's what this phrase says that's causing you to be treated the way you're treated. We have advised, the government of Jamaica, the Ministry of Health, we have advised the airlines that evidence of conditional approval should be provided prior to acceptance of travel bookings. Please do not, and this is the instruction to you, they say, please do not make travel arrangements and purchase tickets prior to receiving conditional approval. Now, this again is up for discussion simply because this document would have been formulated early, and sometimes I believe the wording might need adjusting. I'm not the legal mind, but I'm speaking based on the fact that it's not always possible, especially as it relates to purchasing airline tickets, to wait until you've gotten a COVID test to make that purchase, simply because the lifespan of that test, the duration, the validity, has to be over a certain amount of days. Now, if you wait that close to purchase your airline tickets, you might not be able to make that purchase because the price might be very prohibitive. So some things you have to use a little bit of wisdom. Some things you do not need to follow slavishly, and this is one of them. However, it goes on to say, after you have received conditional approval and made your travel arrangements, you'll be required to log in again and answer the health-related questions again at least 72 hours prior to your scheduled date of travel. This is because your health status could have changed after your application was submitted. You will also be required to fill out the Customs and Immigration C5 form through the website or the app, and there is a JamCovid app in the Apple Play Store that you can download onto your phone, and particularly as a returning resident, you will have tools on that app that will be essential to monitoring you during those 14 days of self-assigned quarantine. Now, this last bit is very important. It says if all is in order, you will then receive a final approval with an electronic travel authorization document, which can be required, which it will, not can now, it will be required for you to board your flight. Please note that conditional approval only allows you to make a preliminary booking. Only final approval in the form of a travel authorization document will allow you to board your flight. You must therefore have the document with you in electronic or paper form when you arrive at the airport to check in for your flight. Now, this is also important because many of our viewers, listeners, are doing the paperwork for auntie, granny, uncle, or just that person who's just not computer savvy. If you do not print the document out and this person traveling particularly out of US or Canada does not have that device nor the ability, know how to go onto the Wi-Fi because they don't have data, if the airport employee is not so inclined, that presents a problem. So, because you're dropping off your loved ones at the airport and they might not be so technologically savvy, they get into frustration. And the airline, they're moving you along. So if you're not ready, there might be occasion where they might want you to kind of step aside. Now, you really don't want that to happen. So, of course, we want you to make sure that the document is printed. If it's on the smartphone, they know how to bring it up. If the green check, all clear mark is not yet on the document, you probably need to show them how to go back to that Gmail email address and first of all, how to go back to the JamCovid site to make a request to log back in to get that one-time code, which will be sent to the email address and which will give them access to the JamCovid site to view whatever updates there are. So it's a bit of a process and it can get very, very bothersome, particularly if you're feeling flustered and unsure of yourself. So this guide really is to walk you through that process and to avoid the airlines from turning you away, and they will turn you away. Now, I'd really like to get your feedback, your comments, your thoughts on this video, and I'd also love to hear any difficulties, any struggles you've had with the JamCovid portal, and also what your travel experience as a Jamaican national has been returning to the island since this pandemic has changed the way we travel. Now, for tomorrow's video, we will speak about the requirements for the non-Jamaican, the visitor, and how those two differ. And also, we will speak a bit about my experience, because you see, there are those who think I'm very adventurous. I don't see myself as adventurous, but I'm very curious. I like to test things. And so I tested this JamCovid for myself and the whole procedure. And I have also had encounters with persons who, upon returning to the island, their situation proved very, very interesting. So, if you want to hear all of that and more, you are going to have to come back during this entire week for our updates and our videos, as we will continue to talk about JamCovid, re-entry, passports. That's another story. We'll talk about passports, we'll talk about visas, we will talk about the new program. I've been getting questions about the new COVID insurance that you will be expected to pay as a non-resident of Jamaica coming in. So, lots for us to do. This is your girl Sheri, and I'm always happy to update you on the daily news.